welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the work of a master satirist who found some pretty deep meaning in something most of us try to avoid, doing absolutely nothing.
So let's just jump right into that paradox. We're going to explore the brilliantly witty world of Indian writer HARISHANKAR PARSAI. This is a guy who took the whole idea of laziness and turned it into something profound, something hilarious, a full-on philosophical act. At the heart of Parsai's philosophy is this character, the Nithala, or the idler. Now, in society's eyes, this is just a useless person because they don't do any work. But Parsai flips that whole definition on its head right away, and he makes you ask, what does work or useless even mean?
And this is Parsai's first big point, and wow, it's a zinger. He's arguing that we don't really judge the value of an action, do we? We just judge its consistency. If you're doing something all the time, no matter how ridiculous it is, we start to call it work. It's just a fantastic jab at our totally arbitrary ideas about productivity. Okay, so let's really dig into this idea when work isn't work. If consistency is really the only thing that matters, then what does our society actually decide to call work and what gets dismissed as just, being lazy? The examples he gives are they're hilarious, but they also cut pretty deep.
So check out this comparison. It's so simple, but so devastating. Both of these things, praising God or making faces, they both take time, they both take focus. But one is seen as this noble devotional act, this holy work, and the other is just seen as completely pointless. Parsai forces us to question who made that rule and why.
And he applies the exact same logic to our ideas of morality. So a woman who follows the strict rule of having only one partner is seen as pious, as virtuous. But another woman who, get this, might have had fewer partners in her whole life but didn't stick to a rigid rule, well, she's condemned. What Parsi is showing us is that our judgment often has nothing to do with the action itself. It's all about whether you're following the system.
Okay, this is where Parsai's satire gets really, really bold. He takes that same critical thinking and points it directly at one of the most sacred texts in Hinduism, the Bhagavad Gita. He basically asks, what if this ancient wisdom is just for sale to the highest bidder?
He breaks down a super famous verse in 3 absolutely brilliant steps. And in the process, he turns this deeply spiritual teaching completely on its head to show us a very different and very modern motivation behind it. So first, he lays out the original verse. This is a cornerstone of Hindu philosophy, right? It teaches you to be detached from the results of your hard work. It's a purely spiritual concept. Or is
Then, boom, here comes the satirical twist. He rephrases it, and suddenly it's not a path to spiritual freedom anymore. It's the perfect slogan for exploiting your workers. It becomes an order, basically telling the working class, hey, just keep your heads down, keep toiling, and whatever you do, don't you dare ask for the fruits of your labor. Your wages.
And here is the final punchline. This so-called divine wisdom, Parsi says, sounds a whole lot less like it came from a god, and a whole lot more like it was cooked up by a bunch of CEOs in a boardroom. It's just a cynical, brilliant, and hilarious take on how sacred ideas can get twisted by people in power. And this sharp, critical eye isn't just for religion. No. He also turns it on India's own relationship with things like progress and innovation and, you guessed it, laziness. So he sets up this little scene. It almost feels like a folktale. You've got 3 Indian sages just chilling under a tree, deep in thought, when along comes a man on a horse, a symbol of busy, important action, and he just dismisses them, calls him lazy, and shoos him away. Then he contrasts that with the classic story of Isaac Newton. Newton was also just sitting around being idle under a tree, but the key difference? There was no horsemen. Nobody was there to tell him to get a job. His idleness was left alone, and it led to one of the biggest scientific discoveries in all of human history. And here's Parsai's biting conclusion. What if the potential for greatness is everywhere, but in some places it gets stamped out by a culture that looks at quiet thinking and just calls it being lazy? India, he's cheekily suggesting, might have missed its own chance at a Nobel Prize because it just couldn't leave its thinkers alone to think. All right, so if society's idea of work is totally arbitrary and just sitting around thinking gets you punished, what is the idler's ultimate philosophy? What's the most logical way to live in a world like that? Well, the answer comes from this guy, Jagannath Kaka, a man whose entire purpose in life seems to be just sitting. And his logic is kind of flawless in its simplicity.
He says, look, any action you take, there's a 50-50 chance it's going to be a bad one. But if you do nothing, you have a 100% success rate of not doing anything bad. It's the ultimate risk-free philosophy. And now for what might be Parsai's most daring and darkly funny argument of all. He takes a real, very poignant historical moment, the last words of India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. The connection Parsai makes here is, well, it's shocking, but it's pure satirical genius. The very moment that Nehru declared his work was finally finished, his life was over. And from this, Parsai pulls out the idler's ultimate survival guide. Finishing your work is literally fatal. In a world with an endless to-do list, the only way to guarantee you'll stick around is to never, ever clear your desk. All of a sudden, that huge pile of unfinished work isn't a sign of failure, it's a strategy for a long, long life. And that's really the question Parsai leaves us with. In our world, our hustle culture, with the constant notifications and pressure to be productive, maybe the most radical, the most philosophical, and maybe even the wisest thing any of us can do is to just stop, to sit, and to embrace the profound power of doing nothing at all.